Sensational stories about the Xinjiang Uygur Autonomous Region in China have been surfacing in the media, but how accurate are these reports? We'll talk about it. On Monday, China rebuked CNN's report published last Friday on the Xinjiang Uygur Autonomous Region in a rarely seen long response. Hua Chunying, the spokesperson of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, called the story a lie fabricated with ulterior motives. In the story, a Uyghur woman by the name of Mihrigul Tursun claimed that one of her sons died in a hospital in Urumqi, Xinjiang's capital, in 2015. She also said while in jail, she witnessed the deaths of 9 people in a crowded cell with more than 50 other women. Hua Chunying laid out all the details provided by relevant authorities in Xinjiang about the case, complete with specific dates and details, clearly proving the claims by Ms. Tursun unfounded. Yet CNN claims that they contacted, before publication, multiple Chinese government agencies for comment, including the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What is the real story of this woman? Why did the CNN journalists fail to include China's perspective in their story even after Hua Chunying's press briefing? Joining me in the studio are Emily Liu, a news reporter from Global Times who has been running Xinjiang stories, and again Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization. Before we start the discussion, let's first listen what Hua Chunying said this week about dubious ethics by some in the Western media.
Recently, some Western media's Xinjiang-related reports seem to have cited many sources with exact names, but then it proves that these people are non-existent, or what they cited is not true. This report released by CNN is just the latest example in this regard. We hope that relevant media can strictly observe the professional ethics of the press, cherish their credibility, and refrain from citing fake news or made-up stories.
Okay, there are 2 different versions about what happened, whether CNN contacted the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs for information, and how did the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs respond. Now, CNN said that they had previously reached out to multiple government agencies, Chinese government agencies, for comment, including the Foreign Ministry, who were contacted twice for comment on Thursday and once on Friday in writing before publication. CNN also contacted the Foreign Ministry via phone Friday. Now, let's not forget that this story came out on Friday. And Hua Chunying said during her answer to this question, she said that after receiving the questions, we attach high importance to that and immediately verified relevant information with the competent authority of the Xinjiang Uygur Autonomous Region. But obviously CNN was not willing to wait for the result of the verification, and it has issued relevant report last weekend. So I want to start by asking Emily, normally when we're writing a story, when we hear one side of the story, for instance, the account of this Uyghur woman, what do? You go and contact relevant authority for facts, but what happens if they don't respond, or if they respond? What do you have to say in the report?
We were writing the stories that there has no response from authorities as of press time. But this time, CNN just cannot wait for the Chinese response. This may be because instead of listening to China's responses, the rumors of Xinjiang or the Tursun's story are more closer to their imaginations or their presumptions of what happened in Xinjiang.
Yeah, this is your understanding of the situation. But fact is, they reached out to the Chinese government agency. They didn't get any answer for whatever reason, whether they didn't wait or the Chinese agency didn't reply. But actually, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came up with the answers to this question on Monday after the weekend. Dr. Gao, how do you look at this situation?
First of all, I think the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has a point in being very upset about the inaccuracy or falsification in the reports done by CNN. On the other hand, I think it's very normal for CNN to reach out to the relevant government entities, try to seek their confirmation or verification of certain facts in the reports. However, don't forget, China is a big country. The foreign ministry is here in Beijing. Xinjiang is a vast area, 1.6 million kilometers, and there are many, many subdivisions in Xinjiang. To really get down all to the relevant level of the government authorities in Xinjiang is time consuming. So I would say in 1 day or 2 days to verify all these facts by the foreign ministry in China is really almost a mission impossible.
They did it over the weekend. They came with a complete list of things that the lady did in Xinjiang and what happened with dates and details.
That's exactly what we need to give the foreign ministry credit for. So despite of all the technical difficulties, they did what they are supposed to do, but for whatever reason, maybe CNN is a television-based network, they need to run against a tight schedule, they need to get the story out. But the point is that if the report you come up with contains many inaccuracies or fabrications,
let's say, or if it is
that's highly regrettable.
If these information you are not able to verify, what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to say, okay, I can't wait 1 more day or 2 more days, I'm going to go out with these stories anyway because there's an audience waiting for the story, they can't even wait for a little bit more? Emily, what would you do if you're writing a story, you're in a hurry, but the institution you're waiting to get response for important fact-checking is not coming back to you fast enough? What do you do?
I want to fabric. I want to make a story without...
You have to wait? You will wait?
Yes, of course. Because we need to double-check facts before we releasing any news, especially on some important issues like the Xinjiang one. So I don't think CNN's right on this Tursun story.
Yeah, Victor.
But on the other hand, I would also say that maybe we can point it out to the foreign ministry or the information department that once you get the request by CNN or any other agency, while you are doing your homework to get all the facts correct, you can also notify CNN or any other international media agency that I'm doing the checking. So
give me a bit of time.
Yes, I will give you notice I'm doing the right thing, but it may take some time, and I may even want to give you an indication as to how long it may take. This creates a dynamic process, interactive process, so both sides are put on notice as to what should be expected, what the other side is doing, rather than eventually we end up with such a tragic and unfortunate situation.
You raised a very important point, whether the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs tell the CNN journalists that they are verifying the facts, so give us some extra time, whether they did or not.
We do not know.
We do not know, okay, but on the other hand, what is the responsibility of a professional media organization, of a professional journalist, when you do not have the facts checked? Are you going to go ahead and publish these stories? And let's not forget that after Hua Chunying gave all the information, the CNN story still did not mention any details. It just said that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson called this story a lie, but no details given. Emily?
They don't believe in our stories, or because we have reported so many things in Xinjiang, but the West media just does not buy it. They think all our stories just to explain our standards. So I don't think our stories in Xinjiang, they would believe in it. Yeah.
I understand your frustration. Victor, do you see this as some kind of a deep mistrust of the Western media, of Western journalists on stories, especially stories about religious policy, of ethnic policy in China, and when it comes to how China handles terrorism?
The mistrust indeed exists. However, I think there is an even greater problem. That is, there is an apparent deliberate attempt to create a false narrative for Xinjiang. And it may come out of a misinterpreted version of, let's say, freedom of religion, for example, or misunderstanding based on how different minority groups in Xinjiang practice their faiths, or coming out of a complete mischaracterization of what China is doing, because our focus is really against the three evil forces, that's separatism, terrorism, and extremism, which actually exist and which are very, very ferocious forces against the fundamental interests of the people of all ethnic groups in Xinjiang.
Well, you mentioned this deliberate distortion of facts or of images of China. How can you prove that, people are going to say? How can you prove that these are deliberate? For instance, they always talk about this number 1 million. How can you prove that they're wrong?
Now, first of all, there are indeed terrorist activities in China. Many people have lost their lives or suffered injuries by the terrorist attacks. And these terrorists and these terrorist acts need to be condemned, not only by people and government here in China, but hopefully by the international community as a whole. However, when Western media talks about these terrorist attacks, they do not call them terrorist attacks. They sometimes call them, let's say, movers for independence, for example.
This is double standard.
Yes.
This is double standard.
What is the biggest frustration for you when you are writing about Xinjiang? What is the challenge there?
I read so many stories about Xinjiang. I told them that people in the training centers are learning national regulations and laws. They live in the dormitories and they can do sports at the playground. But the Western media never believe this.
Okay, don't worry about that. Don't worry about. But how do you do your job? Do you check very specifically what you're writing? Do you try to bring to the highest standards you can when you're doing your
Yes,
job?
of course. I talked with these trainings in the centers, and I also double-check facts with local officials, things like this, before I release my stories. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a very important topic because we are also journalists. We work in the trade. I was a foreign correspondent, so I think this is not just a lesson for any reporters who either intentionally or unintentionally caused this one-sidedness, but let's remember that we have a very big responsibility on our shoulder because millions of people could be watching us. And the story of Tursun, unfortunately, she was telling the same stories not just through CNN, but she was also telling it to congressional hearing, to U.S. House of U.S. congressmen, and they're passing policy act, legislation based on his story. Victor, what do you think are the consequences if facts are not checked and are not presented on a minimum level even?
Yeah, this is truly a very unfortunate situation, and we need to do whatever we can to straighten out the real facts. And I think while China is faced with these three evil forces, you are talking about Uyghur fighters fighting against American soldiers and NATO soldiers in Afghanistan. At the present moment, there are about 4,000 to 5,000 Uyghur fighters fighting in Syria. So these are real problems, and when they infiltrate back into China, into Xinjiang, they bring back terrorism and extremism and separatism. These are enemies common to China and many other countries in the world. The Western countries should not blind themselves to the ferocious evils of these forces and should stand with China in fighting against the common enemy of terrorism.
We can only hope so. We can only hope that. Yeah, we are going to leave it there. It's a very serious topic, but we're going to leave it there, and with some thoughts for food for thought. That's what I wanted to say. All right, many thanks to my two guests, Emily Liu, a news reporter from Global Times, and Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. And go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point to hear all about past discussions. Also, leave a comment or pose a question. I'll answer them as I see fit. Many thanks. You've got The Point.